Thank you everyone for joining. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. Before I do that though, I do want to briefly introduce myself appropriately. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Verónica Hirsch. I'm Cha'ogonada. From my mother, I'm Chiricahua Apache. And I serve as the Career Readiness and Employment Tribal College and University Program Officer at the American Indian College Fund. And I am one of several staff who live and work remotely. As was mentioned in our main session, our American Indian College Fund for short, our headquarters are in Denver, Colorado, but we have many staff who work remotely, and I'm one of them. So I live and work in Tucson, Arizona, more appropriately, Scoopson, Arizona. These are the traditional homelands of the Thanatan people, as well as the contemporary tribal lands of the Pascua Yaqui tribe. And so I'm honored to share space with you today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to participate in this session. And so I'm going to go ahead and begin. What I'm going to be doing is sharing my screen. I do have a PowerPoint slideshow to share with you. Please feel free if you have questions at any point, concerns, use the chat. If you'd like to introduce yourself, say where you're participating from, if you're at home, if you're in your vehicle, if you're outside, I don't know, in a park, wherever you might be, feel free to share that. Thank you, everyone. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to start this off with a question for all of us. So let me do that now. So my first question for everyone here participating is, what is your gut reaction when you hear the words professional journey? What does that mean to you? And this is the interactive portion of our presentation. If you have your phone, I'd like you to please go to this website, menti.com, menti.com. And when you get there, it's going to ask you for a code. And this is the code I'd like you to please type in, 83554975. And I'm going to leave this slide up for everybody. So when someone says the phrase professional journey, what does that mean? How do you interpret that? What does that call to mind? We have two words. Maybe you don't see this very often. Maybe it's only in sessions like this, but if someone asks you, what are your thoughts? What does it mean when somebody says, where are you on your professional journey? Or what is important to you on your professional journey? What's that gut response that you have? Go ahead and take a few moments. As I mentioned, go to that website, menti.com, type in that code, and yeah, just whatever words, a phrase that comes to mind, even a color, a sound, whatever the case may be. I want to take a few moments for everybody to think about that and to participate. Thank you. We have one response so far. Excellent. And I'm going to show this because I think it's important that we all see what we're all feeling and thinking. So far, this is what everyone has shared. When we hear these words, professional journey, or this phrase, this is what has come up. Challenges, a career, there might be some stress involved. There could be some kind of educational focus. And I appreciate the honesty of this word unqualified. I appreciate, acknowledging that everything doesn't always have to be perfect, rosy. There can be challenges. I know I've certainly had several challenges in my own professional journey. So I think it's important that we bear that in mind. We can have any number of responses, gut reactions to this. I see some other things coming up too. Excited, job, stressful, for sure, it can be. So I would like you to just sit with that idea, that thought, that emotion, that phrase maybe created that gut response in you. And hopefully as we go through this presentation, if you are feeling stressed, or if you are feeling unqualified, I know I have felt that way in many different instances, maybe at the end of this presentation, you'll feel a little less stressed and you'll come to realize that you probably have a lot more skills and qualifications that maybe you are giving yourself credit for. So with that, I am going to stop sharing that screen. And then I want to come over to the rest of this discussion that we will have today. So now I'm going to go back to the presentation that I mentioned. And my next kind of, I guess, place that I'd like us to reflect on, realizing that that was some of our gut responses: excited, pressure, blue, even a color that is associated with professional journey. I'd like to invite you to maybe reframe what you might feel, or what first comes to mind when you hear that phrase, professional journey. So professional journey, we can call it a career, we can call it a job, we can call it employment. Any step along that professional journey, though, starts someplace. And usually where it starts, beyond going to school, earning a credential or a degree, it starts with, let's say, interviewing for a position, finding out, is there a job vacancy? Is that a job I'm interested in? For whatever reason, is that a job that pays enough, the type of salary or hourly wage that I want? Is it something I'm really interested in? Is it something that maybe I just have to do for now? Because let's say I'm doing several other things. Maybe I'm going to school at the same time. Maybe I have caregiving responsibilities, whether as a parent or let's say a caregiver for parents. Whatever the case may be, that professional journey starts someplace. And very often it starts with finding out who's hiring, where, and then filling out an application and going through that interview process, or submitting your resume, going through that interview process. Depending on the position, there might be a few things that you have to fill out. You might need to fill out an application, plus provide resume, maybe even a cover letter, perhaps go through not one, but several interview processes. So yes, admittedly, that gut response, that it can be stressful, that it can be challenging, that it also can be exciting. All of those responses are valid. What I'd like to invite us to consider, though, is to treat this professional journey as its own type of ceremony. And what we heard from our wonderful keynote, the session before us, is that all of us, regardless of what tribal nation of which you are a citizen, whatever tribal traditions that you follow, all of us have an understanding of ceremony, in our own communities and our own families. And so when we think of things as a ceremony, we enter into it with a certain amount of respect. We create an intentional space for that ceremony to happen. Sometimes ceremonies are at specific times of day or in the evening. Sometimes ceremonies are at specific times of year. Very often in a ceremonial context, we know that we're supposed to behave in a certain respectful way, that we're supposed to not be distracted by outside concerns, that we're supposed to focus our minds, our hearts, our spirits on what is happening in that ceremony. And so what I'm inviting you to consider is, if we treat this professional journey process, and knowing that it has to start someplace with that application, with that interview, how might that change the way you feel when you hear those words, professional journey? So with that ceremony process of embarking on a professional journey, I would invite you to consider, how will you create intentional space to calm your mind, your spirit, to have quiet, to feel that although it may be a challenging process, to create a space for yourself where you feel that you can write out your resume or your cover letter, that you can complete your application without distraction, that you are being intentional about creating space for yourself, that you're honoring yourself really by focusing your energy on this part of that professional journey ceremony. And even if that involves prayer, even if that involves offering medicine before you even begin the process, I know that might sound perhaps a little strange, but I'll be honest with you, throughout my career, I'm now 49. At the end of this year in December, I'll be 50. So I'll technically be, I guess, a young elder at that point. But throughout my career of over 30 years, every time that I have chosen to apply for a job, I felt nervous. And because I know I've felt nervous, and that's just who I am, and that's my emotional response, I've chosen to calm myself just with a quick prayer. Sometimes I'll even place a hand, let's say if I have a paper application on it, and just pray to ask for insight, to ask for clarity, and then to think about how I am going to choose to show up in terms of presenting the skills that I have in ways that I think could be helpful to that job. And along with that, along with this type of ceremonial process, it's good to even consider for ourselves as an individual, what's my origin story? How did I get here? I say origin story because with all the different kind of, DC, Marvel movies out, we want to find out, how did this person become good or bad? So that's why I'm kind of using origin story to be fun and silly, but also on a serious note, to think about, how did I get here? What other life experiences did I have? Maybe prior work experiences, prior jobs that I had to get to this point. How have those experiences shaped me to create my origin story, not as a villain, but hopefully as this good professional relative? And then I can ask myself, well, what does that even mean? We always hear, conversation, and even our keynote presentation before mention this idea of showing up, of upholding kinship values, of being a good relative. And so I'd like us to consider, what does that mean in an employment situation, in a workplace, at a job? How do I choose to show up as a good professional relative? And the other question to consider along with my professional journey is, what kind of legacy do I want to leave? I might not always be in a certain job forever, but while I'm there, how am I going to choose to be a good professional relative, the type of coworker that can be depended on, who is kind, who is compassionate, who is helpful, who doesn't pretend to know it all, and who's supportive of my colleagues. And when I leave that job, for whatever reason, maybe I move away, maybe I'm promoted, maybe there's another opportunity for me to take. How do I, when I depart, leave it in a good way? Not with hurt feelings, not in anger, not saying, that's not my job anymore. I don't care if you guys figure it out. How do I leave a positive legacy so that even when I'm not there anymore, people have positive memories of me, like, wow, Veronica was really helpful. We appreciate what she did for us while she was here. The next thing I'd like to consider and offer to all of us is this idea of how we can choose to be, how we can show up. And you see up here at the top, we have this idea of self-awareness and how that is a way of being, how that allows us to really explore what's important to us, our values, and all of those things add up to a worldview. So here you see in this circle, questions that we can ask ourselves: what we know about ourselves, again, like I said, what our values are. And getting back to what I mentioned on the previous slide, what type of legacy do I want to leave? What do I want to be remembered for? How do I want to give back? This idea of reciprocity. Reciprocity is a dual-sided concept. Reciprocity begins with first me choosing to give with a spirit of generosity and abundance and compassion. And when I do that first, it's reasonable for me to expect to receive that generosity and that kindness, that compassion and respect in return. And so this particular model centers that value, that idea of reciprocity, in the context of a professional journey, thinking about what is important to me, how I bring my values, my idea of what I want to leave as a legacy, how I want to give back. And getting back to what I mentioned previously, the idea of a professional journey, even the interview process, as a form of storytelling. So all of these things really are allowing me to explain how I want to show up, not just in the world, but also in a specific context, like a job, through, let's say, writing a personal statement, a resume, a cover letter. Sometimes you'll hear people call it an elevator speech or an elevator pitch. If you had 30 seconds to say what's important to you, how would you use those 30 seconds? So these are things that we can consider as we talk about a professional journey and what that means. At the College Fund, as I mentioned before, I work within this area, career readiness and employment. It's really important for us to center ourselves in cultural values. And we know, of course, tribes are different, languages are different, everybody's going to have different creation stories and different, let's say, words to express those cultural values. And we believe there are some fundamental values that, whatever they might translate as in a particular native language, those values underpin what we try to do here at the College Fund when we talk about this idea of career, when we talk about a professional journey. And so we have focused on 6 principles. From the previous slide, here they are. And I just wanted to show those definitions in a little bit larger font. And we call these the 6 R's. So everything that we do when we're having this conversation about a professional journey, it's with these 6 R's in mind. And you can see, I won't read these to you because I know you can do that yourself, but you can see how all of them really are focused on this idea of humility and gratitude. So that humility to understand that I am not the most important person, but I am part of a larger whole. And so it's important for me to then consider, how do I want to contribute to that larger community in the workplace? You can also see here with this definition, again, that humility that I mentioned. I have to be accountable to others as they are accountable to me. It's a two-way street. It's not one-sided. And probably one of the values that we really emphasize in our work at the College Fund, and specifically when we talk about this idea of professional journey, is this R of reciprocity. So as I mentioned before, reciprocity is a dual-sided concept. It can't just be that I always give, and I never receive. And it can't be that I always take, and never give. But it has to be this idea that I am giving and taking in a balanced way, in a way that is considerate, in a way that is also allowing me to admit when I need help, and that there's no shame in that. That in me saying I need help, or I don't understand, or I need to look to another colleague who has more experience or more wisdom in this area, it's not that I'm admitting that I am somehow incompetent or unqualified. It's allowing me to then create an opportunity for myself to learn, so that I can be an even better colleague in my workplace. I can be an even better professional relative. And so with these 6 R's in mind, what they really amount to when I put them in practice is I'm able to create really healthy relationships in my workplace. And those relationships, that healthy relationship, can be reflected even in my personal life, in all aspects, however I choose to show up, in whatever way I choose to show up. And really, I think, all coalesces to this idea of that legacy that I mentioned earlier. How do I want to be remembered? Not in terms of having a fixation, let's say, on fame, but more so, how do I want to be remembered as choosing to intentionally show up as a good professional relative, as somebody who can be counted upon to be helpful and to be kind? And so, as I mentioned, one of the values that we really emphasize at the College Fund is this idea of reciprocity. And I'll share with you a little bit why we do that. Every year, actually twice a year, in the fall and in the spring, the American Indian College Fund distributes a fall survey and a spring survey. And this survey goes out to all of the scholars who have received one of our full circle scholarships. So usually every fall, every spring, we have at least 1,500 scholars that we support with scholarships. And we hope we get 100% survey completion. We don't always, but we usually get about 1,200 surveys out of that 1,500 people who have received a scholarship. We usually get that much of a response to our survey. And among the survey questions, we ask our scholars, why have you chosen to go to college? And we leave it as an open-ended question. And our scholars just can type their response in, whatever they feel, whatever they want to say. There's no character limit. It's really open-ended. And overwhelming, for the past 2 years that I have been at the American Indian College Fund, overwhelmingly, we get about 78% of our scholars out of that about 1,200 scholar survey responses, who tell us their main motivation for going to college is that they want to give back in some way. They want to give back to their tribe. They want to give back to Native nations, broadly. They want to give back. They want to support their family. It's all about this idea of them giving back. And so we appreciate that our scholars are telling us that. We're not telling our scholars, hey, you guys should all want to give back. It's our scholars who are telling us, this is my number one reason for going to school, is I want to give back. And we so want to respect and honor what our scholars are telling us. We take what they're telling us very seriously. And so for that reason, this is why we've chosen to really focus on this idea of reciprocity, so that our scholars can feel that they have the tools and the resources that they can effectively give back, by earning their degrees, by earning credentials, whatever the case may be. And so one of the things we've talked about, since we've placed such an emphasis on this idea of giving back, of reciprocity, again, this is because our scholars have told us this is what matters to them, is we've tried to figure out, well, what does that mean just in a daily practice on a daily basis? We hear that word, it's beautiful, the idea of giving and receiving in an equal way, in a balanced way. But how can that help us when we talk about this idea of professional journey? What does that look like, let's say, in an interview, when I'm applying for a job? How can that be helpful? How can that help me then show up as this good professional relative? So one of the things that we would suggest, and of course, you can modify it in a way that makes sense to you, is this idea of creating this reciprocity daily practice and how that can help all of us. So as we start our day, our work week, many of us work Monday through Friday. Sometimes people work on the weekends, like today. But whatever the case may be, as you start your work day, it might be in the morning, you might have a swing shift, you might even work late at night. But as you start whatever that work day looks like for you, what do you want to accomplish that day? Do you have a specific project that you need to work on? Is there maybe something that you've been putting off? I'm guilty of that. Sometimes we put things off. Myself, sometimes I procrastinate because I do feel unprepared, or maybe I even feel unqualified, but it still needs to get done. So then how do I get myself over that hump? How do I get myself out of that maybe focus on perfectionism, or that feeling that, oh, I don't know if I'm smart enough to do this on my own? How do I get myself out of that type of negative thinking and refocus on that reciprocity motivation and think, if I do need help, where can I go to get that? So I can think about what I can do on my own. I can think about what I need help doing, and then I can consider how I might ask for help. And just taking a few minutes out of my workday whenever I start it, just to think about those things, can help me maybe not feel as overwhelmed or as intimidated by all the things that I need to do, all the things that I need to accomplish in that day. And it also allows me then to think about how my colleagues might be feeling. Where are they struggling? How might they benefit from whatever help that I can provide? So it really helps me, again, maybe get out of that feeling of so much stress. I mean, the stress might still be there in the background, but knowing, well, there are resources, there is a method I can use to help me successfully do what I need to do in a given day. And so along with that, part of that reciprocity is also thinking about how, when I make this a practice, when I make this something that I just do, that this is just how I operate, how I choose to work and interact with my colleagues, it also helps me really develop what is a very powerful, I'm going to call it an indigenous transferable skill. Sometimes you'll hear people call things soft skills like punctuality, effective communication, whether that's through email or through a telephone call or whatever the case may be, that these are quote unquote soft skills. That just means that these skills are not specific to just one type of job, but you can use them again and again in whatever type of job you have, in whatever type of industry. We always know we have to communicate. We always know that we have to learn how to be punctual. We have to be on time. We always know that we have to maybe learn and be willing to learn new things, whether that's a new process or a new type of software or whatever the case may be, that we have to have an attitude that is willing to learn new things and say, well, I don't know how to do that, so therefore I'm not going to do it. But to have that willingness, that curiosity, that is a very powerful skill. And regardless of what job we have, if I start at entry level, or if I'm a supervisor, or if I'm even a director or a program manager, those are all transferable skills, or the so-called soft skills, which they're really not soft. Sometimes they are challenging and skills to cultivate, but those skills can be transferred and they're beneficial. And the good news is we can continue to refine those skills. We can continue to become better at communication, better at developing, the ability to take on new information and to process it quickly so that we can do our job even more effectively. All of that is helpful. And all of that can really be reflected back to this idea of reciprocity. Where do I need to ask for help and receive it? Where can I offer help to a colleague that might need it? And so with that, now that we've gotten our minds kind of primed with this feel-good idea of reciprocity, now, how does that actually show up in a real world context, a real world example? Well, I want to share with you. So at the American Indian College Fund, we offer several free resources. And one of them is called Focus2. It is a self-assessment. And what it can help us do when you go through this, and I've included information how you can create an account and experience this amazing career and education decision-making tool for yourself. Some of the questions that Focus2 asks have to do with your values, your value system. So getting back to what I've shared previously on slides, what values are important to you in a job, in an employment setting? Do you value, let's say, something like reciprocity? Do you value this idea of reflection, having enough time to be able to really consider, the importance of what you're doing? Whatever values are important to you, is a value of yours, is it related to a specific salary amount? Is a value of yours related to the type of work environment? Do you prefer to work alone? Do you prefer to work as part of a group? Whatever the case may be, this can help you figure out what are those values, what are those workplace settings, what are those workplace environments that really are important to you, so that as you continue along, let's say if you're in school, as you continue with your degree, or let's say you already have a job and you're going to school at the same time, you might then be able to decide, is this an area, a career path that I want to continue? Or do I want to use this particular experience, this particular job to help me build up my employment history, to help me build up my skill set? But maybe there's another career path that I want to take on, and so for now, this is helpful, but I'm going to then think about how I can take the skills from this job or this particular field of type of employment industry, and I want to use it and transfer it to something else. This particular free resource that we offer can be very helpful to you as you make those types of decisions. And so some of the questions that come up in these different assessments, I don't know if all of you like to do these types of assessments. I know I do. Sometimes I'd even do silly ones, like, what type of, I don't know, cat would you be, or something like that. This is a little bit more focused on career things, but these are some of the questions that these different assessment kind of little quizzes will help you answer for yourself. And with all of your answers, there's not a right or wrong answer. This is really an opportunity for you to engage in that R of reflection. And I'm going to go back to that slide. It was a few slides ago. So the R of reflection, of self-examination, thinking about what is important to us, how these values shape our personal stories, how these values are part of our professional journeys. So when you're going through this Focus2 model, this is, again, a reflective process. It allows you to engage in that R of reflection and think about these things that matter to you, where your priorities are. And you see, these are just some of the possible questions. There are many more questions than this. But as you go through this, it allows you to create space. Again, like I said, have that type of ceremony, that intentional space, that time that you set aside for yourself to honor your desires, your thoughts, your interests, so that you can make informed decisions about the type of job you want or about the type of degree that you want to earn. We also have another free resource. Once you go through that Focus2 process, answering some of those questions, thinking about what's important to you, what your values are. This other resource that we have, which we call Connect, is a virtual mentoring network. And what is exciting about it is now you get to engage in the art of relationship building. So within the Connect platform, there are a number of people who maybe have already completed the degree that you might be studying and earning. They might already be working in the field that you're interested in working in and getting a job in that particular area. And so this allows you then to uphold that art of relationship. I'm going to go back to that slide. And thinking about how you could create a long-term type of sustainable practice. When you use the Connect free tool, like I said, you're able to ask working professionals who've earned the type of degree that maybe you're studying to complete, who are already in that type of job that maybe is your dream job, we hope. And they can be honest and tell you, this is what it's like. You know, maybe if I knew things that I know now, maybe I would have done certain things differently. Maybe it would have been easier if I had done something, you know, in a different way. Or the way that I did it has been very successful for me. And I want to share that with you. So what's exciting about this type of platform, this Connect virtual mentoring network, is that you are having the opportunity to create relationships with people who actually want to become your friend, your professional relative. It's not that you have to reach out to somebody and wonder like, oh my gosh, am I bugging them? Are they going to be irritated that I'm asking for their advice? The professionals who are on this virtual mentoring network, they want to connect with you. They're like, I haven't connected with somebody yet. Do you know if someone's still interested? I mean, they're really excited to be able to work with you to become your professional relative, to provide some of that insight, to provide some of that encouragement, and maybe to even introduce you to people that might be helpful to you as you complete your degree or your credential, or as you're trying to break into a certain type of job where they could say, hey, I know about this person. I think that that particular company or organization is hiring. You know, let me connect you to that person. So that's what's amazing about this. I encourage you all to go to this website you see listed and to go ahead and create a free account. The Connect platform also has internship and job postings that you can apply to directly from it. And if you're thinking like, well, how do I know I have a good resume before I apply to this? Where can I maybe get some help about creating my resume? Well, you can go to our free resume builder. So our resume builder has some templates that are already loaded into it. And again, this is a situation where you will have to create a profile, but here is the address for you to do that. You can create an account. You can copy paste, you can import information if let's say you have a LinkedIn account already, or you can just start typing, you know, if you have it even handwritten down, you can just type it into this resume builder, find a template that you really like, that you think like, yeah, that looks good. If I'm going to use that template, I feel really confident that I'm going to be able to demonstrate, you know, I have experience or I have the ability to take on the challenge of that particular job or that particular internship. You can use this tool to help you do that so that you can showcase your talents, your skills. The other thing I want to mention about our resume builder is, let's say you are starting out, you know, your employment history, and maybe you don't have as much employment history as somebody who's already been employed like I have over 30 years. One thing I want to encourage you to consider though, is anything that you've done on a voluntary basis, that counts as experience. Even certain things that might feel like, well, is that really work experience? Can I really claim that as work experience? let's say you've done something in your community. For instance, I know of one individual, they are from a Pacific Northwest tribe, and many tribes in the Pacific Northwest have a tradition of ocean-going canoe building and canoeing. And so this particular person was younger, probably maybe around 19 or 20. And when I chatted with this individual, the person said, well, I don't really have much job experience. And we talked a bit more. And in the course of our conversation, they shared like, oh, well, I'm really dedicating a lot of my time. I'm part of this within my community. There's a group of us who are learning to create a canoe out of a redwood tree. And the person was explaining all the process that went into that. And then I was listening and I was asking some questions, and then the person shared yes. And then once we do that, once we follow the appropriate protocol and bless it and dedicate it, then we, as this group, we will take it and we will participate in this upcoming canoe journey where many different tribes from that particular region in the Pacific Northwest where they participate. And the person was going to be part of that event. And I said, okay, so let's relate what you're telling me now to, let's say, work experience. And over the course of our conversation, the person came to realize that they actually have a lot of transferable skills. They have a high degree of experience with teamwork and with effective communication and with staying on task to complete a major project on time. And so as the person was then really reevaluating and reflecting that hour of reflection about all the hard work that they've done and are doing and will do as part of this canoe journey effort, they came to realize, I have so many more skills than I originally gave myself credit for. And so they were able to capture that and include some of that on their resume. And so that's just one instance. If you feel maybe you're not as confident or you don't have as much work experience in a particular area, I encourage you to take a step back, again, to think about what your values are, what is important to you. Treat this experience as its own type of ceremony, and think of maybe some of these other, perhaps unexpected ways where, in fact, you do have that professional expertise, that experience that can only help you in whatever type of job that you're trying to apply for and obtain, or whatever type of internship you're going for, or whatever type of degree that you're trying to earn. Another resource that we have, and some of you who are participating in this particular session, some of you might be scholars at any one of the 35 tribal colleges and universities that exist. But we also provide a link to all of the tribal colleges and universities to their main website. And if you are completing, let's say, a credential or a degree at a tribal college or university, a TCU for short, and it's a 2-year program, but let's say you're thinking, I've been successful completing this associate's degree or this credential, maybe I will want to apply to a 4-year degree program. There are several TCUs that offer 4-year degree programs, a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. And so we provide this link, especially if you're thinking about maybe you want to transfer to a 4-year institution to build upon your 2-year degree, whatever the case may be. And so this is another resource that we also want to remind people exists, and we're happy to provide it. And then besides TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, there are a number of colleges and universities across the country that are mainstream. Very often you'll hear this term, predominantly white institutions, or PWIs. Just means that it's not a TCU, but it's mostly a mainstream institution, a mainstream environment. There are many of those colleges that provide Native-focused degree programs, and those degree programs might be in American Indian Studies. They might be devoted to tribal governance and management. They might be degrees that are devoted to specific Native languages, whether that is an Anishinaabe language or Thamalatham language or American Indian linguistics, whatever the case may be. There are a number of colleges and universities across the country, and this map just shows a handful of those. And we have even more free tools and resources that we want to make available to all of you. So this particular, these guidebooks, Native Pathways and Career Pathways. The Native Pathways College Going Guidebook, I think, would be really helpful for you to access that and to maybe even hand that handy while you are completing that Focus2 profile. I'm going to go back to that slide. So that Native Pathways Handbook can be very helpful as you are considering some of these questions when you're taking those little self-assessment quizzes. Where do you want to live while you're in school? Where do I want to work? What do you need to know about yourself and your possible profession so that you can get a job in that particular industry? All these questions can really be considered as you're looking at this Native Pathways College Going Guidebook. And the Career Pathways Guidebook can be very helpful as you are, again, considering how you want to connect with professionals who are already working in your field. So I'm going to go back to that side very quickly. So as you consider creating a profile on Connect, this virtual mentoring network, you can have that Career Pathways Guidebook handy so that you can think about what questions might you want to ask somebody who's already working in your field. How can that person be helpful to you? And I'm including this picture because I think it gets back to something that I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, that idea of how we can bring our authentic selves, the values that are important to us, who we are as Native people, and work in an environment where we have professional relatives from various backgrounds. And this is a picture that is taken with some of our college fund staff, some of our scholars who receive scholarship funding from us, and some of our professional relatives who work at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. I like this picture because as you can see, there's a lot of people smiling. And I think that's really the point, that we want to help you have access to resources, that you feel supported, that you feel honored, that you feel encouraged as you consider your career and what that looks like for you. I also want to include all these different ways that you can connect with us. I'm going to leave these up here. And with that, I'm just going to open this up. Does anyone have any questions based on what I've shared so far? I know it was quite a bit of information, so I don't want to miss out on any questions anyone has. In order for me to look at the chat, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I will copy these links down if anybody needs them. So let me stop sharing and check the chat. I don't see that anybody has any questions so far. And you can feel free to unmute yourself if there's something that you want to share. Maybe you have another resource that you know about. I'm sorry for zipping around here. So if you have a question you want to ask, or maybe you have a bit of advice that you want to give, please feel free to share that now. I do see a good friend of mine here on this, Chad. Good to see you. Okay, I'm going to read off a couple questions. So, Josephine, thank you. Your question: how do you deal with being on a campus that doesn't have a lot of Native people? Well, I would speak to some of my own personal experience. So part of my professional journey included me receiving my undergraduate degree, a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of California, Davis. And this was way back in the 1990s. At that time, the campus was about 30,000 people. And of that number, there were about less than 150 self-identified Native people out of almost 30,000. And of that number, there were about 30 of us that, were active, that were part of different clubs that were devoted to Native students. And so in my particular degree program, I was the only Native woman in my program. I was an environmental science major. And I will say this for myself, the way I chose and was able to create community. UC Davis is one of the first campuses that ever created a Native American Studies program in the country. That Native American Studies program was begun in 1969. And so I personally chose to take, as a minor, several Native American Studies classes. And over the course of taking that classes, that is how I was able to connect with other Native people on campus. It just so happened none of us were in the same degree, but those of us who were able to fit, these Native American Studies courses into our course schedule and to, satisfy some of the degree requirements of, let's say, general education requirements and what have you, we were really able to create community. So Josephine, I'm not sure if maybe on your campus there are Native American Studies or American Indian Studies courses. I think that could be helpful. I know not every campus has, let's say, a Native American Student Center or Native American Student Affairs Office. Some campuses might just have a multicultural student or multicultural kind of emphasis, resources for students. But I would also suggest doing that because that was also helpful to me. I also earned a degree at the University of Idaho, which had a few more Native students, but still within my degree program, I earned a graduate degree there. I was one of 2 Native students who was in my particular program in my entire department. So what I was able to do, though, is to connect with other people of color, and specifically one woman who was from an Indigenous community elsewhere, an Indigenous community in the Haya tribe in Tanzania. And it was amazing that we were both, Indigenous scholars from different parts of the world, but we had so much in common. Our value systems were very similar. So I would hope that maybe you are able, Josephine, and for anyone else, who feels like, man, I'm the only one. That is hard. It is hard, and I'm not going to try to pretend that it isn't. But to also think about, to acknowledge that you're tough. I'm going to say it that way, and that you're resilient, and that everything that you've done in your life has gotten you to a point to take on that challenge, even when that challenge might sometimes feel overwhelming. But I encourage you to remind yourself of just how tough you are and resilient you are. So I hope maybe that can be a little bit helpful. Thank you for that question, Josephine. Let's see, who else? Yes, hello, Chad. It's so great to see you. Yes, our sister, our chosen relative, Naomi Gilmore. It's so fun, in my role at the College Fund to reconnect with different Native people, Indigenous people, as I mentioned before, from various places throughout the globe. And Chad is definitely one of those individuals. But just to be able to connect with people and to share good medicine and talk stories. So glad to see that you're here, Chad. And thank you, Cherish. Thank you for participating. Thank you for coming to this session. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, Chad, for sharing what you're doing at the University of Minnesota, the Morris campus. So that's awesome that there's a Native American Success Program Center. And as I mentioned, even in that previous slide that showed some of those Native focused degree programs and Native student centers, it's so helpful to know that the University of Minnesota Morris does have support programs where 34% of the student body is Indigenous. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Chad, for including that in the chat. Well, thank you everyone for your participation. I'm going to go ahead and end this here. So within Career Readiness and Employment, we are a 3-person staff, and this is how you can find us. I'm going to also go ahead and put my email in the chat so that you can easily copy paste it if you have any questions. And I just, again, want to remind all of you how tough you are, how resilient you are. And we're all very proud of you here at the College Fund. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. There are some great sessions that my colleagues are doing. I wish I could clone myself and attend some of them. So please enjoy the rest of the conference. Just to remind you, there are 2 more sessions after this one that you can choose from. And tomorrow, Monday, May 20th, and Tuesday, May 21st, we also have sessions that you can join as well. So please feel free to share that with your friends and your colleagues and people who matter to you. Thank you so much, everyone.